that's going to do it for this edition of Social Roundabout. We'll be back with another hit in a little bit, but now I'm going to toss it over to Thomas Wasson and Anthony Smith.
Yeah, thank you so much for that Social Roundabout update. We'll check in with you again throughout the show. We're going to go now to our next guest, CEO over at Workhound, Max Farrell. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you're right down the street. We have to get you in office one of these days.
Always happy to go down the road, but the internet is the great connector, isn't it?
It most certainly is. Talking about the rumor mill, and we're not talking about the Fleetwood Mac album, of course, but trying to address, rumors and perceptions for drivers on the road and how they interact. And so, looking at the market, it's going downhill. What are some of your thoughts? What are some ways that carriers can kind of get ahead of the message and help kind of calm the waters as these drivers are experiencing a little bit of turbulence?
Yeah, so first off, it's not downhill for everyone. There's a number of companies out there that have secured long-term contracts, whether that's dedicated or just steady, reliable loads from their customers over the past, and so they are experiencing less volatility. So I wouldn't say the volatility is 100% universal, but when it comes to the if there is a question around that loads are going to be harder to get, this really should be muscle memory from spring 2020 when the pandemic hit. There was a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and so in any sort of situation where there's uncertainty, you have to control the message, or someone else is going to do it. So for companies, if they're in a good spot, they need to communicate, hey, we're in a good spot. We got these dedicated contracts lined up. We're going to keep moving forward. If a company doesn't, if they're relying more on the spot market, then they need to share, here's what we're doing to get in a good spot, and communicate the different steps that they're taking, the progress the sales team is making. Those are the sorts of things that'll go a really long way in making sure that folks feel like their company has their back.
Speaking of the company, I know one of the big things that's really going to be impactful and important is the company culture. Can you talk to how important that is when kind of dealing with issues of rumors and things like that happening into an organization?
Yeah, it starts with communication. A company that has a consistent communication strategy in good times and bad. So if a company's only communicating when good stuff happens, like a pay raise or something like that, a company also needs to be committed where if something goes wrong or they screwed up, they need to raise their hand and say, hey, here's the issue here, but here's what we did to fix it. Because people are going to find out one way or another, and you might as well control the message there. The other thing that innovative companies have been doing in the past couple of years, they've been asking the question, how do we take care of our people? Of course, pay rates have continued to rise in the past few years, and the most innovative companies out there spend a lot of time creating simpler pay structures so that pay is easier to understand and people don't feel like they're getting cheated or shorted. And also, there's more guaranteed pay out there than before. So in a period of uncertainty, companies need to be asking, what are they doing to provide certainty to their people? So communication is certainly one of those things, but sharing a simpler pay structure, one that provides more certainty to drivers, even if they're making less, certainty goes a long way.
It can often be difficult for carriers to get that kind of feedback from the drivers. I remember at a large company I went to, we just send messages over the driver tech and say, press 1 if satisfied, or press 4 if unsatisfied. Trying to get ahead of this and get this communication out. Are there any tips companies can do to help try and penetrate this and actually figure out what the drivers are saying before they start talking about it amongst themselves?
Absolutely, yeah. If you talk with drivers about the in-cab messages that they get, it quickly turns into a bombardment because operations says, "Oh, we got to send this message." There's a weather alert here. Safety says we have an update. Recruiting says, "Hey, we want to remind people about our referral bonus." So that communication mechanism can quickly become noise. When it comes to gathering feedback, at Workhound we do focus on capturing anonymous feedback and creating a real-time feedback loop. And the why behind it is because we know that there's a fear of retaliation in the industry. If you think about it, some drivers have had bad experiences out there and burned a bridge with a prior company. And so they're fearful that the next company is going to treat them the same way. And what's really important for companies is instead of getting just fluff feedback, you really want to get that honest insight about what are you doing well, but also where are you missing the mark as a business. So having a mechanism to capture that feedback, ideally anonymous, is really beneficial, because then you can get those honest insights to understand what are people wishing and wanting and thinking and feeling, and making sure that there's a process to deal with it. You think about in-cab messages. One of the biggest questions that drivers are going to share is, where is this feedback going? Because they're going to assume it's going to go to their driver manager. Well, more often than not, the friction that a driver may have is with their driver manager. And so making sure that there's a mechanism in place where leadership can see firsthand what drivers are saying out there is really critical.
And Max, we've been talking to definitely a lot of internal forces here. Can you talk to external a little bit here when you're looking at other drivers at other companies, and how can that kind of factor into what you have going on internally?
Yeah, well, first off, you talked about drivers talking to other drivers at truck stops or Facebook or something like that, and they're all being incentivized by their company to do so. So if every company should have a referral bonus in place. Most of them already do. If not, their peers certainly have one. And happy drivers are the best recruiters out there, and they're actively sharing, hey, here's how my company's treating me. Do you want to go experience the same thing that I'm experiencing? So right now, drivers are actively going to recruit other drivers because they're economically incentivized. And also, like if for any of us, if we have a good experience at a restaurant, we want to tell our friends or family about it. So that same sort of thing's happening out there with drivers.
Trying to find out, when you're formatting this and getting questions and answers, are there any best practices? Because, if you ask the right question, you get the right answer. Is there anything you'd recommend that some of these companies should try to do instead of a sliding scale, in order to actually ask the right thing in order to receive the right feedback?
Yeah. Well, if we think about the trucking industry, turnover rates are averaging around 95%, and so if our turnover is that high, there's a lot of things that we don't know about, and your traditional survey creates bias. It's management saying, we think we know what the issues are, but if our turnover is that high, we have some blind spots. So one of the most impactful things that companies can do is embrace asking open-ended questions. How is somebody feeling about work? Why do they feel that way? And then let people surface the real issues. And it's fascinating what winds up happening, because we don't know what we don't know. So let's let our folks on the front lines tell us. You brought up the numbers scale, 1 to 5. You have to ask yourself as a company, what does a 3 get you? What's more impactful is having that raw, honest insight as far as what are your people really thinking out there, so that you can start to see trends to realize, for example, there's a company that we work with in Minnesota. They saw a lot of drivers were frustrated about the terminal in Florida because there are all these potholes. Well, the company execs are in Minnesota. They don't see what's happening in Florida. So this becomes a really great place to source some of those issues they didn't even know to ask about. And so that's one of probably the biggest recommendation I'd make to companies is embrace open-ended feedback, because you need to find out the things that you didn't even know to ask about.
And Max, we're talking about drivers right now, but I can only imagine this is going to be impactful for other segments of the supply chain. Can you talk to that a little bit?
For sure. When it comes to people across the country right now are feeling uncertain. They felt that way for 2+ years now, and the hits keep coming. And so companies do need to be committed to understanding what are people really wanting out there, whether you're in an office, whether you're working remotely, whether you're in warehousing, manufacturing, or even a logistics or 3PL company. Like, people want to know that their company has their back, and companies need to realize that the needs of people have evolved in the past couple of years. So you think about the pandemic, a lot of us took time to reflect and to ask, what do we really want out of our careers? What do we want out of our personal lives? Are we sacrificing something in our careers that's impeding us from living our best personal life? These are all very personal questions. And what's wound up happening is that instead of this work-life balance, we're really in a stage where it's a work-life blend. We often talk about inside our company that it all comes from the same bucket. The energy that we pour into our personal world, it comes from our business world as well. So making sure that companies are really taking time to understand their people and understand what they want in this evolved environment is critically important. We've heard about the Great Resignation. We've heard about the labor challenges. They're happening all across the supply chain. They're happening in tech. They're happening in offices. So companies need to patch up the leaky bucket, make sure they take care of their people.
Thank you so much, Max. I'm very excited to see, as well as Workhound further develops your processes, and keep an eye out for your growth here in Chattanooga. And don't be a stranger. You got to come by. We've got a whole freight alley downstairs to check out.
I'm always down for a cold one. I'll catch y'all later.
Thank you so much, Max. Don't touch that internet dial, folks. I know it's a radio term, but there is an internet dial somewhere in this world. We're going to go hit a quick break, and then we'll be right back.